What I've always struggled with is at what point in time did those officials believe it became an unlawful assembly and on what basis? Because it just seemed to be a terminology that started to morph and become adopted with no particular triggering event or explanation as to what that individual or official thought constituted an unlawful assembly.
One of the attorneys advising anti-COVID vaccine mandate protesters says he's still not totally sure when, how, or why the federal government declared protests unlawful. At the Emergencies Act inquiry, Keith Wilson detailed his efforts to keep core organizers informed and focused in the face of factions seeking to gain influence within the protest movement.
And there's these different people coming and going, and I'm trying to figure out who's who. There was no organization chart. There was no introduction session. It's not even like a meeting where you go around the table and introduce one another. That didn't happen. It was constant chaos.
Wilson says he soon put these groups into three categories: groups who thought they could help organize better, groups who wanted more prominence for themselves, and those who wanted a cut of the $10 million in crowdfunding protesters had raised. Wilson also says he made it clear very early on that a memorandum of understanding being distributed by one of those groups would never work.
This idea that a certain number of people could sign a document and that would somehow compel or incentivize and lead to a change in government, I explained consistently and repeatedly, is legal nonsense.
Wilson also went over how in the dying days of protests, an exit strategy began to emerge. The backdoor deal between the city and protesters would give a chance for truckers who wanted to go, and for a smaller core to stay. But some didn't believe the deal was real, leading organizers to start painstaking efforts to convince people. Wilson added that in the meeting to strike that deal, it was clear that the city considered the blockade at the intersection of Rideau and Sussex to be a problem.
As soon as we got there, we could see why it was such a concern. I think there's 6 streets that come together. There's the very high-end condo tower. There's the U.S. Embassy down the road, the Senate, and on and on. And we're like, okay, we understand why they want this cleared.
In Ottawa, Shally Lee, City News.